The gun was already raised before anyone in the room had time to breathe. 300 people. Crystal chandeliers. Champagne glasses mid-air. And Nyx Calderon, visibly pregnant, standing at the entrance of the Varelli family ballroom, pointing a loaded weapon directly at Orion Varelli's chest. Nobody moved. Not the bodyguards near the east wall. Not the senators seated at table 9. Not the two brothers flanking Orion on either side. Kale, who went completely still, and Riven, whose jaw locked so tight a vein pressed through his neck like a cable. The music stopped. The room held its breath. Orion didn't flinch. That was the thing about him. He never flinched. He stood there in that black Italian suit, wine glass still loosely in his hand, dark eyes fixed on Nyx like he was reading a language only he understood. Nyx's arm didn't shake. Not even a little. Nyx. Orion's voice was low, controlled. The kind of voice designed to calm rooms and end conversations. Put it down. Nyx took one step forward, then another. The crowd parted like water. Shout at me again, Nyx said, barely above a whisper. And I'll end you. A woman near the front table gasped. Someone knocked over a glass. The sound of it shattering on marble floor echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Orion's expression didn't break, but something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, not fear. Recognition. Hi, viewers. If you had walked into that ballroom tonight, who would you have felt sorry for? Drop it in the comments right now. The pregnant Omega holding the gun? Or the Alpha who didn't even blink? Because here is what nobody in that room understood. Nobody except Nyx. This moment, the gun, the crowd, the confrontation, had been planned for exactly 112 days. Every detail, every step, every word. The shaking hands people expected? Nyx had trained against that. The emotional breakdown the tabloids would later invent? It never happened. Nyx had walked into that room with one purpose, and it had nothing to do with revenge. The pregnancy was real. That part was never part of the plan. But the rest of it, the entrance, the timing, the exact table Orion would be seated at, the federal agents positioned in vehicles outside. All of it was designed, approved, and rehearsed. Nyx was not just Orion Varelli's former lover. Nyx was the inside witness the government had spent 14 months trying to find. And tonight was the night the entire Varelli empire would stop breathing. Orion set his wine glass down slowly. He took one step forward, and Nyx held the position, arms steady, eyes fixed. You don't want to do this here, Orion said. Nyx almost smiled, because the truth was this was exactly where it had to happen. In front of 300 witnesses. In front of the senators and the judges and the businessmen whose names appeared in documents Nyx had already turned over. In front of the cameras that the Varelli family had personally invited to document what was supposed to be a celebration. A celebration of power. Instead, it was about to become something else entirely. Riven moved first. Just a half step, a reflex, and Nyx shifted the gun 2 inches to the right without breaking eye contact with Orion. Riven stopped. Kale placed a hand on his brother's arm. The room was so quiet Nyx could hear someone crying near the back. A woman in a red dress, shoulders shaking. She didn't know what she was watching. None of them did. They thought this was heartbreak with a weapon. They thought this was a scorned lover at the end of a long fall. In Nyx's mind, behind steady eyes and a heartbeat that had been trained not to spike, a single thought completed itself. Not with this gun. 6 months before that ballroom. The kitchen light in the Varelli penthouse was always the last one on. Nyx had noticed that early, before any of the suspicion, back when the relationship still felt like something real, or at least something close to real. Orion worked late. Orion always worked late. That was just the rhythm of living inside a family like the Varellis. Or so Nyx had believed. It was a Tuesday when things shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies where someone finds a weapon or a body or a locked door with chains. It was quieter than that. The kind of shift that starts in your stomach before your brain catches up. Nyx had come downstairs after midnight for water. The penthouse was dark except for the thin strip of light under Orion's office door. And voices. Low. Deliberate. Not an argument, something worse than an argument. The kind of conversation people have when they believe no one else exists in the building. Nix stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. The Chicago route closes Friday. Riven confirmed the handoff. The numbers don't move until after the gala. A pause. And the product? Already in transit. Kale's people handled it. Nix didn't know what product meant in that sentence. Not yet, but the word handoff sat wrong, and transit sat worse. And the way Orion's voice dropped on the word people, like the word was a tool, not a description, sent something cold straight through Nix's chest. The office door didn't open. Nix went back upstairs. Didn't sleep. Stared at the ceiling of a room that had always felt a little too large, a little too quiet, a little too designed to impress rather than comfort. The next morning Orion was at the breakfast table. Tailored shirt, coffee in hand, smiling like nothing in the world had wait. And Nix smiled back. That was the moment. Right there. The smile that covered everything. 3 days later, Nix was back in the office while Orion was away at a foundation event. Not snooping, that was what Nix told himself at first. Just looking. Just trying to make the feeling go away by finding nothing. But there was something. Behind the third drawer of the mahogany desk. Not hidden dramatically. Just tucked. A ledger. Thin. Dark green cover. The kind of book that looks like it belongs in an accounting class. Nix opened it. Column after column. City names. Dollar amounts. Initials. Dates running back 18 months. First it looked like nothing. Numbers and abbreviations. Then Nix found the key in the back cover. A handwritten legend, barely 2 inches of text, explaining what the abbreviations meant. T transit. A receipt. H holding. And besides several entries, a 2-letter code. PU. Nix stared at it for a long time. Picked up. That one detail changed everything. The first call to investigator Darnell Hale lasted 4 minutes. Nix hung up twice before the third attempt went through. The number had come from Mara, Nix's closest friend, the only person outside the Varelli world who still felt safe. Mara had passed it through 3 layers of caution. A contact who knew a contact. Someone who worked adjacent to federal channels without being visible from the outside. Hale picked up on the second ring. His voice was flat, professional, the kind of flat that wasn't cold, just practiced. A man who had heard many versions of the same story and knew how to listen without reacting. You have documentation? He asked for sentences in. A ledger, Nix said. Handwritten key in the back cover. 18 months of entries. Silence for 3 seconds. Don't move it. Don't photograph it with a personal device. Don't talk about it with anyone connected to the family. Can you do that? Yes. Then we need to meet. They met in a parking structure in Evanston. Level 4. Middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Hale was shorter than Nix expected. Gray jacket. No badge visible. He looked like a man who coached youth basketball on weekends. Someone completely forgettable in a crowd, which Nix later understood was entirely the point. He explained it without drama. The Varelli family was the subject of a federal investigation that had been running for 11 months. The ledger Nix described was consistent with financial movement patterns the investigation had been tracking through digital channels, but digital channels had gaps. Physical documentation from inside the family was exactly what the case needed to advance. How advanced? Nix asked. Enough to bring charges. Not enough to make them stick without inside corroboration. Nix sat with that. What does inside corroboration mean for me? Hale looked at him directly. It means you continue living your life inside that house. You document what you see and hear. You don't take risks. You don't escalate. You let us build the case around what you give us. The drive back to the penthouse took 26 minutes. Nix spent every one of them in silence. There was a moment, sitting at a red light on Michigan Avenue, watching ordinary people cross the street with coffee cups and grocery bags. where the choice felt too large to carry. Turning back seemed possible. Pretending the ledger was nothing. Accepting the life that had been handed over and finding a way to live comfortably inside it. The light turned green. Nix didn't move for 2 full seconds, then drove forward. 2 weeks later, in a clinic near Wicker Park, a doctor confirmed what Nix had already started to suspect. Pregnant. 11 weeks. The room was small and white and completely ordinary, and Nix sat on the edge of the examination table and felt the entire architecture of the plan shift under that single word. Hale's reaction, when told, was careful, measured. He didn't celebrate. He didn't panic. He laid a folder flat on the table between them and let 2 seconds of silence do the work before he spoke. This changes your risk level. I know. If the family learns you're pregnant before we secure the evidence, they will use it. A child inside that bloodline is leverage. You understand that? Nix looked at him. They may try to keep you inside the family by force. They may attempt to remove you from access to outside counsel. They may. I understand, Nix said. Hale stopped. Then I need to know you're still in, he said. The answer didn't take long. I'm still in. Hale nodded once, closed the folder, stood. Then we move carefully, and we move fast. Living inside a lie required a specific kind of stillness. Not silence. Silence was suspicious. The kind of stillness that looked exactly like presence, like engagement, like a person fully inhabiting their life without question. Nix had become very good at it. Breakfast with Orion most mornings. Real conversations about real things. City politics, the Foundation's upcoming annual report, which Chef Orion wanted to hire for the gala. Nix laughed at the right moments. Asked the right follow-up questions. Looked across the table at the man who had once felt like safety and found a way to keep the face completely neutral. It was exhausting in a way that had no name. Some mornings were harder than others. There were moments, small ones, where Orion did something that didn't fit the version of him Nix was working to document. A Sunday morning when he sat beside Nix on the couch without speaking, just present, one hand resting near Nix's without touching. A Tuesday evening when he came home with food from a place Nix had mentioned once, months ago, in passing. The kind of detail a person only remembers if they are paying close attention. Those moments were dangerous, not because they changed anything, because they made the work harder. Nix had asked Hale once, during one of their structured check-ins, whether it was normal to feel that confusion, whether other witnesses experienced it. Hale had paused before answering. Yes, it's normal. It doesn't change what the documents say. That answer had been enough. The recording device was small enough to fit inside a hollowed-out pen. Mara had passed it through during a lunch that looked completely ordinary from the outside. 2 friends at a cafe on a Wednesday. Nothing remarkable. Nix placed it in the office 2 days later. The placement required timing. Orion had a 1-hour call with the family attorney every Thursday at 2. The office would be occupied, door closed, which meant the device needed to be inside the room before that hour began. Nix found a reason to be in the office Wednesday night. A phone charger left deliberately near the bookshelf. Retrieval looked natural. The device stayed. Thursday passed. Friday, Nix transferred the audio through the secure channel Hale had established. Saturday morning, Hale called. "We got it," was all he said at first. Then, after a breath, "There is a major operation scheduled during the gala. The family is using the event as cover. Every significant player in the network will be in one building." Nix stood at the window of the guest bathroom on the 3rd floor, the only room in the penthouse with a lock that didn't feel watched. How major? Major enough that if we move during the gala, Hale said, we close the entire network in one night. Downstairs, Nix could hear Orion on the phone, his voice moving through the floor like current. "When is the gala?" Nix asked. 6 weeks. The window glass was cold under Nix's palm. 6 weeks of stillness. 6 more weeks of breakfast conversations and carefully neutral expressions and a growing belly that Orion had not yet been told about. 6 weeks. Nix could do 6 weeks. The scope of it was almost impossible to hold in one thought. Hale laid it out in pieces. Always in pieces, always in controlled settings, never more than what Nix needed to carry out of each meeting without risk. But across 3 months of check-ins, the full picture had assembled itself like a map being drawn from the outside in. The Varelli family operated inside a network that moved people. Not products, not weapons, not money alone, though money moved too in volumes that made the ledger entries look like pocket change. People, specifically vulnerable people. People in transit between countries, between systems, between situations that had left them with no stable ground. The Varelli network offered them passage, offered them work, offered them safety, and delivered something different entirely. Holding houses in 4 Midwestern cities. Transit routes that overlapped with legitimate shipping infrastructure. A financial layer built through real estate holdings, a hospitality group, and 2 shell companies registered in Delaware. The foundation. The same foundation Orion hosted galas for, the same foundation whose annual report Nix had helped proofread over breakfast, was the cleanest layer on top of a structure built from something much darker. Politicians had been paid to look away. Judges had been paid to delay. Local law enforcement in 2 counties had personnel inside the network. Not suspects, active participants. Alpha-controlled. Alpha-protected. Built over 17 years with the kind of patience that only exists when a family believes it is completely untouchable. How many people know this? Nix asked during the check-in in early October. Hale looked at the table for a moment. In terms of our team, 12. In terms of people who suspect but can't move. More than that. And the people inside the network. The ones being moved. He didn't answer immediately. That pause held more weight than anything he could have said. Nix looked out the window of the nondescript office building where they always met. A Tuesday afternoon. Ordinary street. Cars passing. A kid on a bike. People disappear when they get close to families like this. That was Mara's voice in Nix's head. Said over the phone 3 weeks earlier, in the careful way Mara said things she was afraid of. Not dramatic. Just true. I'm not trying to scare you. I just need you to know what you're walking into. Nix had told her the decision was already made. Mara had gone quiet for a moment. Then you better make sure it counts. It was going to count. The gala was the collection point. Hale explained the logic clearly. The Varelli family hosted the gala every year as a visibility event, press coverage, philanthropic optics, political relationships maintained in person. But this year's gala had been designated internally as something additional. A confirmation meeting. Every major figure involved in the network, financial architects, transit coordinators, the political contacts who kept the infrastructure protected, would be in the same room at the same time for the first time in over 2 years. For the federal case, it was an opportunity that existed once. Maybe once ever. We need the family occupied, Hale said. Security distracted. Guests frozen in place long enough for our teams to position outside and execute simultaneously. And my role in that. You are the distraction. The word sat flat on the table between them. Distraction. Nix turned it over. Understood it. You need the confrontation to happen publicly. Inside the room. With witnesses. Yes. So every pair of eyes in the ballroom is on us. Not on the doors. Yes. Nix thought about what that meant. Walking into a room full of 300 people who had watched Nix move through the Varelli world for 2 years. Showing up visibly pregnant. Raising a weapon. Forcing a confrontation that looked, from the outside, like a breakdown. Being seen as the unstable one. The emotional one. While the real work happened at the exits. It required swallowing something. Not pride exactly. Something quieter and harder than pride. Nix looked at Hale. I need to know the baby is protected. Whatever happens in that room, I need a guarantee. Hale didn't hesitate. You'll have a vest. You'll have 2 agents positioned within 20 feet of you the entire time. And the moment the doors open, you step back. And Orion? The question left the room feeling different. Hale's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just enough for Nix to read it. The raid goes forward regardless of individual guilt levels. Everyone present is subject to detainment until the evidence is processed. Nix nodded slowly. That includes him. Yes. The word landed somewhere complicated. Somewhere Nix didn't have time to examine right now. Not with 6 weeks left. Not with a plan still requiring precision. Not with a child growing steadily beneath a vest that hadn't yet been fitted. Outside, the sky had gone the color of old metal. Nix stood, pulled on a coat, moved toward the door. One more thing, Hale said. Nix stopped. Every major figure connected to this network will be in that room. People with real power. People who have made very specific choices over a very long time. He paused. When those doors open, the story changes. Not just for the case. For everyone who ever moved through that network without a choice. Nix looked at him one last time before walking out. That part didn't need a response. It just needed to happen. Orion was already at the door when Nix came downstairs with the bag. Not a large bag. One bag. Clothes, documents, the few things that actually belonged to Nix and not to the life that had been built around Nix inside this penthouse. Orion stood in the doorway of the hall. No jacket. No phone in hand. Just standing there, looking at the bag first, then at Nix with an expression that didn't have a clean name. Where are you going? He said. Not a question. Nix kept moving toward the front door. Nix! I need some air. That's not a bag for air. The front hallway of the Varelli penthouse was marble and glass and 22 feet long. Nix had counted it once. Something to do at 3 in the morning when sleep wasn't available and the mind needed a task. 22 feet. It had never felt longer than it did right now. You're not leaving, Orion said. Not threatening. Not loud. Just certain. The way he said most things, like the outcome had already been decided and the conversation was just catching up. Nix stopped. Turned. Looked at him. Orion's eyes dropped to Nix's midsection for just a moment. The visible curve under the coat. The thing Nix had managed to conceal from him for 11 weeks through careful layering and deliberate distance. His eyes came back up. Something moved across his face. How long? He said quietly. Nix didn't answer. How long have you known? The silence in the hallway pressed in from both sides. Nix. His voice broke on the second syllable. Just barely. Just enough. Talk to me. And that was the problem. That was always the problem with Orion. He could break his voice in exactly the right place. He could drop the controlled surface and show something underneath that looked real, that maybe was real, and it made the entire architecture of the last 3 months feel like it was built on a question mark instead of solid ground. Nix set the bag down. Not because the plan changed. Because this conversation was going to happen regardless, and it was better to have it standing still than running from it. I'm leaving for a few days, Nix said. I need space. That's all. That's not all. Orion, you've been different for months. He stepped forward. I know you. I know what different looks like on you. And I've been waiting. I've been giving you room because I thought whatever it was, you'd tell me when you were ready. He stopped 3 feet away. Are you ready? Nix looked at him. This man who ran a network that had swallowed hundreds of lives and then came home and remembered the name of a restaurant Nix mentioned once and broke his voice on the second syllable of a name like it cost him something. That contradiction didn't have a clean resolution. You don't understand the system we're inside, Orion said, low, almost careful, like the words carried more weight than he was willing to put on them directly. Nix went very still. That sentence. That specific arrangement of words. What does that mean? Nix asked. Orion looked away. Out the window. The city below, all light and distance. He didn't answer. He just stood there like a man who had said more than he intended and was trying to decide whether to take it back. Nix picked up the bag. I'll be back in a few days, Nix said. This time Orion didn't move to stop it. Nix walked out the door and stood in the elevator with both hands pressed flat against the wall and breathed. Just breathed. Because something about those 7 words had shifted the ground beneath the entire plan. You don't understand the system we're inside. Inside. Not we built. Not we run. Inside. Hale put his pen down when Nix finished talking. That was how Nix knew the information mattered. Hale never put his pen down mid-meeting unless something required his full, undivided attention. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for approximately 4 seconds, which was, in Nix's experience with him, the equivalent of another man pacing the room. He said inside. Hale repeated, "Yes, not we control, not we built. Inside." That's the word he used. Hale picked up a folder, set it back down. This is consistent with something we've been sitting on for about 6 weeks. There's a layer in this network we haven't been able to fully map. A layer above the Varelli brothers, above Kale and Riven, possibly above Orion. He paused. Possibly. Nix absorbed that. You're saying someone else runs this. I'm saying it's possible the Varelli family is not the top of the structure. And if that's true, Orion's position inside it may be more complicated than we've characterized. Complicated how? We don't know yet. That answer was not enough. Nix said so directly. I understand, Hale said. But we're 4 weeks from the gala and we can't restructure the operation around a theory. What we know is still what we know. The evidence points to the Varelli family as the operational center. Whatever Orion's internal position is, guilty, complicit, or trapped, the raid goes forward. The arrests happen. The network closes. Nix looked at the table. And after that? After that, the evidence determines what happens to each individual. The finalization meeting happened 5 days later. 12 people in a room that looked like a conference space for a mid-level insurance company. Folding tables. Cheap coffee. A whiteboard with the ballroom layout mapped in dry erase marker. Nix sat at the end of the table and listened to each position being assigned. Teams at every exit. 2 agents in catering uniforms already scheduled as working staff. That clearance had taken 3 weeks to arrange. A signal coordinator positioned outside who would receive Nix's confirmation and open the operation. The confirmation was a single text message. 4 words. It's time. Move now. That was it. 4 words and a century of harm could start its collapse. Nix's role was mapped out to the minute. Enter the ballroom at 9:42. Cross to Orion's table by 9:46. The confrontation needed to last a minimum of 6 minutes to allow all exterior teams to reach their positions simultaneously. 6 minutes. In front of 300 people. With a weapon that wasn't loaded. That detail, the unloaded gun, had been Hale's requirement. Non-negotiable. Nix had pushed back on it once. Just once. Hale had explained it with the kind of clarity that didn't leave room for argument. If anything goes wrong inside that room, I need to know you're not the variable that makes it worse. Fair. The vest fitting happened that Thursday. A female agent named Rashida walked Nix through the placement with practiced efficiency, checked every adjustment twice, and then looked Nix in the eye and said simply, "You're going to be fine." She didn't say it like a comfort. She said it like a fact she had verified. That mattered. The night before the gala, Nix sat in the small rented room near Wicker Park and thought about Orion's face in that hallway. The way he hadn't moved to stop the exit. The way those 7 words had come out like something that had been held under pressure for a long time. Maybe he was trapped. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing and that sentence was just a manipulation. Maybe both things were true at the same time. Nix thought about the ledger, the transit routes, the 2-letter code and what it meant for real human beings moving through systems designed to consume them. Those people didn't have the option of standing in a marble hallway weighing complicated feelings. They didn't have a choice at all. Nix did. And the choice had been made 107 days ago at a red light on Michigan Avenue. Tomorrow night it would finish. The ballroom doors opened at 8. By 8:45, every table was filled. The chandeliers were at full brightness. A string quartet played near the far wall. Senators, city officials, philanthropists, and people whose names only appeared in rooms like this one. All of them present, all of them dressed for a celebration that had no idea what was about to walk through the main entrance. At 9:41, Nick stood in the outer corridor, vest fitted under the dress, phone in the left pocket, the unloaded gun in the right hand, held at the side, out of sight from the door. One breath. Two. The coordinator's voice came low through the earpiece. Teams are staged. All positions confirmed. You're green. Nix pushed open the door. The sound hit first. Conversation, music, the warm noise of a room full of people who believed they were safe. Then the light. Then the faces turning, one by one, as Nix moved through the entrance and into the ballroom. The first person to see clearly was a woman near the coat check. Her mouth opened. Then the table nearest the door. Then the ripple moved outward like something dropped into still water, and the music didn't stop immediately. It took 8 more seconds for the quartet to register the shift in the room and trail off into silence, one instrument at a time. By the time Nix reached the center aisle, the entire room was watching. Orion saw it from 30 feet away. His eyes found Nix immediately, like they always had, like a frequency he was always half-tuned to. And in the space between one breath and the next, every calculation Nix had spent months building came down to this. Whether the expression on his face, right now, in this moment before any word was spoken, was the face of a man who had been expecting this. It wasn't. That mattered. Nix kept walking. The gun came up at 20 feet. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just a clean raise of the arm, steady, pointed directly at Orion's chest. A woman at table 7 screamed. Chairs scraped. People stood. A bodyguard near the east wall moved 2 steps before Riven cut a hand through the air and the man froze. Riven's eyes swept the room. He was already calculating, already reading exits, already looking for the shape of the thing before anyone else in the room understood what the shape was. Kale went completely still and placed both hands flat on the table. That was the difference between the 3 brothers. Riven moved. Kale stopped. Orion stood up slowly. His chair pushed back without sound. He straightened to full height, and he looked at Nix across the distance between them without a single word, and his face held something that no one else in the room was positioned to read correctly. Not anger, not shock, something that looked almost like relief. Nix stopped at the edge of his table. "You need to sit down," Orion said quietly. "Shout at me again," Nix said, "and I'll end you." The line landed exactly as it was designed to. The crowd read it as a threat from a person at the edge of something irreversible. They heard a scorned partner, a breakdown, an emotional collapse that had walked in carrying a weapon. They were wrong on every count. 40 seconds in. Nix needed 6 minutes. Nix! Orion's voice was careful now. Not controlled, careful. There was a difference. "Whatever you think." "I don't think anything," Nix said. "I know. You don't have all of it. I have enough." Riven shifted his weight. Just slightly. Nix clocked it and moved the gun 2 degrees without breaking eye contact with Orion. "Don't," Nix said flatly. Riven stopped. 2 minutes in. 300 people holding their breath. Phones pulled out, then put away, then pulled out again, the instinct to document fighting against the fear of drawing attention. Orion took 1 step around the table. "Stop," Nix said. He stopped. "You walked in here carrying that," he said, eyes dropping to the gun then back up. "You're carrying more than that." His eyes moved briefly, just briefly, to Nix's midsection. "You think I don't see you? I've always seen you." Something about those words required effort to push past. Nix pushed past them. 3.5 minutes. "The people your family moved through those routes," Nix said. "Loud enough now. Loud enough for the front tables to hear clearly. The people who disappeared inside your network. They saw you too. They trusted the offer. And you consumed them." The room shifted. Not physically. Something in the temperature of it. A senator at table 3 leaned back in his chair. A man in a gray suit near the bar set his drink down and didn't pick it up again. Riven's jaw tightened. "That's not," Kale started. "Don't," Orion said. Kale stopped. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Nix's phone vibrated once in the left pocket. Confirmation. Agents in position. 20 seconds remaining. Orion looked at Nix with that unreadable expression. The one that had lived in the space between everything Nix knew about him and everything that couldn't be explained away. "I'm sorry," he said. "Low. Real. Not for the room. For Nix." 5 minutes and 50 seconds. Nix's thumb moved to the phone in the left pocket. "For words. It's time. Move now. Send." For 3 seconds nothing happened. Then the east doors burst open. Federal agents entered information. Badges visible, voices clear and controlled, cutting through the ballroom like a current. "Federal agents. Nobody move. Hands where we can see them." The room erupted. Chairs overturned. People stood. The woman in the red dress from earlier grabbed the arm of the man beside her. The senator at table 3 rose to his feet and then sat back down very quickly when an agent moved directly toward him. Riven turned for the service exit. 2 agents were already there. He stopped. Cale didn't move at all. His hands stayed flat on the table. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Orion stood completely still, looking at Nix. Not at the agents. Not at his brothers. Not at the room collapsing around 17 years of constructed power. Nix. And in his right hand, held loosely, almost like he had forgotten it was there, was a small black flash drive. The arrests took 40 minutes. 40 minutes to process a room full of people who had spent years building the kind of power that was supposed to make moments like this impossible. They sat in folding chairs brought in from outside. They made phone calls that didn't connect the way they expected. They spoke in clipped sentences to lawyers who arrived in under 20 minutes and then went quiet when those lawyers realized the scope of what they were walking into. Cale was handcuffed at table 1. He didn't fight, didn't argue, sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the floor with the expression of a man doing math he already knew the answer to. Riven was brought back through the service entrance by 2 agents who looked entirely unbothered. He said 14 words before a lawyer cut him off. 14 words that were recorded and would later appear in 3 separate case documents. Nix stood near the north wall with Rashida and 1 other agent, watching. The vest was uncomfortable now in a way it hadn't been during the adrenaline of the entrance. The baby had been still for the last hour, which Rashida had noted and flagged. A medic was already staged outside, ready to come in the moment Nix gave the word. Nix wasn't ready to give the word yet, not until Orion was processed. He had remained standing at his table through the initial chaos. He hadn't reached for a phone, hadn't tried to move. When the lead agent approached him, Orion had reached into his inside jacket pocket. Slowly, deliberately, 2 fingers, narrating the movement out loud so no one misread it, and produced the flash drive. He held it out. The lead agent took it without speaking. Then Orion turned and placed his hands behind his back. No argument, no resistance, no final speech, just that. Hale appeared at Nix's shoulder sometime around the 20-minute mark. He stood there for a moment watching the room before he said anything. "The drive has been confirmed as legitimate," he said quietly. 18 months of internal communications, financial authorization chains, transit route documentation going back further than our own records. Nix looked at him. He had it the whole time. Hale was quiet for a moment. "It appears so." "Was he?" "We don't know yet," Hale said. "The investigators will determine what his position actually was inside the structure. Whether he maintained that evidence as leverage for himself or whether he intended at some point to." He stopped. "We don't know." Across the room, Orion was being guided toward the exit by 2 agents. He turned once, found Nix's eyes across the ballroom the same way he had found them from 30 feet away when Nix walked through the door. The distance between them was different now. Final, in a way the hallway conversation hadn't been. He didn't say anything, just looked. Then the agents turned him toward the door and he walked out without looking back. The medic came in at the 35-minute mark. Nix submitted to the check without complaint. Blood pressure, heart rate, A quiet conversation about what the next 24 hours should look like given the stress of the evening. Everything was fine. The baby was fine. That was the sentence that hit the hardest. Not the arrest. Not the flash drive. Not the confirmation that the network was collapsing in real time across 4 cities as teams executed simultaneous warrants. The baby is fine. Nix stood in the clearing ballroom. Chandeliers still bright, dinner plates still half full on overturned tables. The string quartet's instruments abandoned near the far wall, and felt something that wasn't triumph and wasn't grief. Something in between. Something that didn't have a name yet. Mara called at 11:43. Nix answered on the second ring. "It's done," Mara asked. "It's done." A long pause on the line. "And you?" Nix looked around the ballroom one last time. "Still here," Nix said. Mara exhaled. That exhale, just air moving through a phone line, carried more relief than any sentence could have held. For months later, the trials began. They were not quick. They were not clean. Real trials never are. They move in the way that large, complicated systems always move, slowly and with a great deal of noise, full of delays and motions and moments that feel like the truth is losing before it ultimately doesn't. But the truth didn't lose. Cale Varelli entered a guilty plea on the 42nd day of proceedings. The attorney's statement was 2 paragraphs. The deal included full cooperation with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. There was no dramatic moment. No tears. Just a man in a suit standing before a judge and saying the word guilty in a voice that had gone completely flat. Riven went to trial. It lasted 11 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The political figures named in the evidence, the senator from Table 3, 2 city officials, a federal court judge whose name had appeared in the ledger's authorization column 8 separate times, faced their own separate proceedings that would extend over the next 2 years. Some would fight. Some would fold quickly when they understood the depth of the documentation against them. The network that had operated for 17 years across 4 states, built on the movement of people who had no one to protect them, was formally dismantled through 4 simultaneous federal operations over a single weekend in January. That was in the news for 3 days. Then something else replaced it. That's what Nix found hardest to absorb. Not the justice, but the speed at which the world moved past it. 3 days of headlines, and then the scroll continued. As if the 17 years and the hundreds of lives could be acknowledged and filed away that quickly. They couldn't. Nix knew they couldn't. The baby came on a Thursday morning in late February. Healthy. Loud immediately. The kind of loud that fills a room and makes the medical staff smile without meaning to. Nix held the baby and felt the full weight of every decision made over the last 8 months settle somewhere permanent. Not heavy anymore. Just real. Solid in the way that things become solid once they stop being uncertain. Mara was in the waiting room. She had been there since 6 in the morning. When the nurse brought her in, she stood at the bedside and looked at the baby for a long moment without speaking. Then she looked at Nix. "What's the name?" she asked. Nix had decided weeks ago. "Zephyr," Nix said. Mara nodded slowly, like the name made sense in a way that didn't require explanation. It did. The visit to Orion happened 6 weeks after the birth. Not because it was required. Not because anything demanded it. Because there were things that needed to be said face to face, between 2 people who had shared a life before it came apart, before the visit could be put behind both of them permanently. The facility was quiet. Not harsh the way facilities appear in films, just institutional. Long hallways with controlled lighting. A visiting room with chairs bolted to the floor. Orion came in looking like himself. That was the surprising part. Like the removal of the empire hadn't actually removed the person underneath it. He sat down across the table and folded his hands and looked at Nix with the same steady attention he had always given to things that mattered to him. Nix placed a photograph on the table. He looked at it. His expression changed in the way expressions change when they encounter something that bypasses all the trained control and gets to the unguarded part underneath. He didn't reach for it. "Zephyr," Nix said. Orion looked up. "That's the name." He nodded once. They sat in silence for a moment that wasn't uncomfortable. Just waited. The kind of silence that holds everything two people can't fit into words and doesn't try to. "What you said at the gala," Nick said. "I'm sorry. What did that mean?" Orion looked at the table. "It meant that I had been trying to find a way out of the system for 2 years, and couldn't find one that didn't bring the whole structure down on both of us." He paused. "You found a way I didn't have the courage to find myself." Nick sat with that. "The flash drive. I compiled it over 14 months, he said. "I didn't know who to give it to. I didn't know who was safe. I didn't know if the investigation was real or if it was a test set up by the people above us to find out who would break. You gave it to the agents. Because you walked into that room." He looked up. "And you were still standing. After everything, still standing. And I understood that the moment I'd been waiting for had arrived." Nix didn't respond immediately. There was love in the room. That was true. It would probably always be true in some form that couldn't be fully argued away or explained clean. But love was not the same as a future. And some things, once broken open, don't rebuild into what they were before. They build into something different. Something that takes longer to name. Nick stood, picked up the photograph. "Your attorneys say the cooperation credit is significant," Nick said. "That matters for the timeline." Orion nodded. "Take care of yourself," Nick said. He looked at the space where the photograph had been. "Take care of Zephyr," he said. Nix walked out of the visiting room and down the long hallway with the controlled lighting, and outside the air was cold and bright and completely ordinary in the way that only feels remarkable after a very long time in the dark. Mara was waiting in the car. She didn't ask how it went. She just started the engine. And Nick sat back and watched the facility disappear in the side mirror as the car moved forward, and thought about a baby named Zephyr who would grow up in a world where the names in that ledger were case numbers now, where the routes were closed, where the structures that had protected the wrong people for 17 years had been pulled into the light and made to answer. Not a perfect world. Not a finished one. But a different one. Because one person had chosen to keep moving at a red light on Michigan Avenue when stopping would have been so much easier. And sometimes that is exactly enough. My child will grow up in a world where silence no longer protects power. That is the only truth worth carrying forward. If this story moved you, if something in Nix's courage, or Orion's complexity, or the weight of a choice made in a parking garage in Evanston reminded you of something real, drop a comment below and tell us what it brought up for you. Your thoughts matter here. This is a space where real conversations happen. And if you believe someone in your life needs to hear a story about what it actually costs to stand up, share this. Right now. You never know who needs it today. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story on this channel. Every week we bring you narratives that challenge, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen goes dark. The next story is coming, and it starts somewhere you won't expect.